Assalamu alaikum and welcome to a very special podcast today on cremation of Muslims and the rise of Islamophobia in Sri Lanka. We normally associate Sri Lanka as a place of holiday, a tropical area of sand and sea and beaches, a place for peace and content. However, in the recent past months, in fact, a few years, the situation for Muslims has really changed. And to discuss the rise of Islamophobia and the plight of the Muslims in Sri Lanka, I have two guests today. One from Geneva, Dr. Muiz, who is the president of the Human Rights Council, and from London, Dr. Firoz Mubarak, who is a COVID-19 lead. He's a medical director for Central London and North London, if I'm correct. Before we proceed, my guest, can we start first about discussing the situation or the demography of Muslims within Sri Lanka? I mean, what their population, how they situated themselves, how Muslims came about in Sri Lanka. Maybe Dr. Muiz, you'd like to start us off?
Yeah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum for everyone. Thank you very much for having me in this podcast discussion in Sri Lanka, cremation of Muslims and rise in Islamophobia. First and foremost, I would like to express my sincere thanks and gratitude and appreciation on behalf of Sri Lankan Muslim community for hosting and shedding light on this crucial topic. I have been living in French last 17 years, and Islamophobia is replacing anti-Semitism, which was carried out the eve of World War II against the Jewish community. I am living in the very land where the Islamophobia is playing the crucial role. We can call in French as l'Islamophobie. The term itself was coined in 1918 by the French researchers. The term Islamophobia is strike out, pronounced or written before the term Islamophobia pronounced in English. So I'm in France now, then I would like to share about the Sri Lanka, how the Islamophobia is hitting in the Sri Lankan context. Sri Lanka is a multi-ethnic and multi-faith beautiful island, and ethnic, religious and linguistic differences continue to bring the community is into conflict. Muslims Sri Lanka are living around 9.7% of the population. Sri Lanka became the hotbed for the racist and hardline extremists, those who want to grab the power and upholding the power. In recent years, Islamophobia has been on the rise both in India and Sri Lanka. The new form of Islamophobia in India and Sri Lanka could have far-reaching political, social, and health implications. So, in the recent days, during the pandemic, it is spread with the COVID. The anti-Muslim sentiment came up, and the governments and the authorities are trying to disguise or trying to disdirect the people from this COVID situation. So we are living in the Sri Lanka is located next to India. We are India's neighbor. So anti-Muslim the sentiment is started soon after the end of the country's civil war in 2009. So like last 10-11 years, the Sri Lankan Muslim have been facing the very severe and the very difficult times they are facing with the Islamophobia and especially with the hardline Buddhist activities.
Can I bring Firoz? Sorry.
Yes.
Do we then say that the Islamophobia in Sri Lanka is more to do with institutionally based rather than more from the street ground level? Or do you think it's much more widespread than I'm thinking?
Sorry, the question's for me?
So the question is, do you think the Islamophobia in Sri Lanka is more institutionally based? Is it more government and, from the hierarchy? Or is it more mainstream and comes from the base down?
Answer it. Assalamu alaikum, Jazakallah for inviting me for this. Just for a small correction, I'm a clinical director for NCL for SAS service. So it's a small correction to my status. Anyway, the direct answer is no, it's both. It used to be institutionalized racism. You can just go, you will know that there is a bit of a difference between how you're treated at the higher level or even when you work as a professional. But it's all changed since the LTTE was brought to the ground. Things have become more visible, more.
LTT? I'm sorry for.
LTT is the Tamil Tigers who were fighting for 30 years for the freedom of their free land in north and east of Sri Lanka. That's the fight of the Tamils, part of the Tamils, should I say. But since it was brought down after 30-year war, all the focus changed on Muslims for three grounds. Do I have time to explain that? On three grounds. Number one, what they saw was there was a significant reduction on the population growth in the Tamil population because majority, 80% of Tamils live in north and east. When they are in war, obviously, their reproduction rate is low, and also their life, the quality of life goes down. There's a significant number of Tamil population went out of the country to Europe or as refugees and to India. For that reason, the percentage, the population percentage actually went down, I think about by 1.8% or something like that. And obviously, Muslims were not caught in this war, even though in the eastern side there is a larger Muslim population. They had some difficulties, but they were not caught on that. They were not targeted on that. So for that reason, there was no change to the Sri Lankan Muslim population as a practical imitation. For that reason, there was a population growth. It was about 7.8% of the 8% went to 9.8%. So significant growth. And they used there are main three pro-Buddhist fundamentalists called BBS, Bodhibala Sena, Sinhala Urimaya, and Singhale. And what they used is they used the political media to project that into the general peaceful Sinhalese population, which is 78% of the country, to tell them, listen, we are keeping, turning a blind eye on the Muslims. Look at this, the Muslims are flourishing. They are more pronounced. They are more affluent in terms of, social status, and they are more into the business, and they're not affected by any of this war. Our soldiers are dying because they went to war with LTTE, and the Tamils were dying. So your focus should be this. And then they turned the whole thing around into the Islamophobia. Look at that. They're not part of us. They got their own dress code now. It was never been the case before. They want their own law. We have a different marriage law for the Muslims. And they will not come and eat in your shop because it's not halal. They want their brand to come on your production, because the thing about Sri Lanka is Muslims are financially reasonably well off, in the sense that they are commerce people. They are businessmen. So for that reason, they spend a lot of money. As with most of us, we are not stingy in spending money for food. So they ate in renowned places. So you can visibly see Muslims were more affluent, and they used it as a point to turn against Muslim in terms of creating jealousy within the general public. I have to say, I think about 70 to 80% of Sri Lankan Muslims live outside the concentrated area, which is north and east. Obviously, you know that in 1980s, Sri Lankan Muslims were just kind of kicked out of the northern peninsula by LTTE. But despite that, Muslims live in a dispersed manner within Sri Lanka. They're scattered. They've got Muslim town and villages scattered. So asking or fighting for a motherland was never a practical solution for us, and we never intended to do it. So which means that we live with Sinhalese community. So as you might know, Sinhalese is comprised of Buddhist, majority of Buddhist, and then you got Christians, but there was never an issue. They sometimes would eat on the same plate. It's that kind of relationship they had. From going from that level to isolating Muslims, the largest part there was initially there was some political play, but these are the which is the Buddhist fundamentalists, who are mostly monks, are the ones who were pivotal in changing the public view against Muslim, because obviously it's a Buddhist country. People are very receptive to monks, whatever their statement, whatever they do. To an extent, even forces will not go against them because they have that level of respect. and then that all ended up, even with some political siding of major parties, because they found that their voting power goes down if they don't support them. And that brought this two-fronted racism and Islamophobia at the institutional level as well as the population level.
So just to summarize the way I see it, and you explaining very well there, that Sri Lanka had an internal problem between Sinhalese and the Tamil Tigers. When that problem went away, about 2010, I think it was around 2009 or 10.
Yeah.
Then the Muslims became the scapegoats. They were targeted, and that has gone up. So would you say now that COVID-19, the pandemic that we all face, has become instrumentalized by the government against Muslims? Dr. Muiz, maybe you might want to explain to us how COVID-19 itself has played up to undermine Muslim rights and to again violate their human rights and abuses.
Yeah, thank you. By the way, I want to correct one thing. I am not been a doctor. I'm not a doctor yet. So I am Mr. Muiz anyway. So the Sri Lanka, they made the ground, or they brainwashed the ordinary singular people about the Muslims, Muslim anti-Muslim element, and it has been working last 11 years, as I said before. It is increasingly the incidents happen to start. So the Muslim face many riots. Many Muslims have been faced many riots, like in Digana Candy issues and some other issues in southern part of Sri Lanka. So the Muslims being marginalized by an agenda came from we say the Islamophobia elements. So especially in the Corona time or pandemic time, the Muslims are treated, they do like this. Muslims has been treated like, let's say, I'm sorry to.
So I understand your.
So you're like a third-class citizens. That's what you're trying to say.
Yeah, exactly. They are seeding the from the singular people that they are the victim community, and the people they try to buy this idea. That's the reason when the Sri Lankan Muslims and also recently the East attack has taken place. With this attack also, Muslim was marginalized because they could not go further with their businesses and the activities. This is what happening, and marginalizing is taking place, especially in the pandemic time. They are using they want to marginalize in many ways. And on the I have to share one incident about the 20 years girl. Sorry, 20 years kid was.
Luis, come back to that in a minute. Just want to set the background to this. Sorry. First, just to our listeners and Dr. Firozia in particular, I mean, the main issue we have at the moment is the concern of the Muslims that their bodies are being cremated in COVID-19. Now, is this a medical requirement? I mean, is that more safe for a community that people who suffer from COVID, that they should be cremated rather than buried? I mean, you're a medical doctor. What does the World Health Organization and other health bodies say about this, Dr. Firoz?
Yes, I'll give you the answer, and I also would like to touch a little bit on the question you put for Shuaib, Brother Muiz, after this. So, yeah, straightforward answer to this would be there are no scientific evidence to prove any COVID-19 infected bodies will contaminate. So, the issue, what they brought up is Sri Lanka has got a high annual rainfall. So if you cremate bodies with COVID-19, the rain will wash out whatever the breakdown product of the body down the soil onto the water table. It'll carry into water reserves, and then obviously human and animals consuming that water will go into their body and they'll get infected. So this was the pseudoscience, as per se, that they have actually brought it in. To back that up, there's not a single scientific evidence. COVID-19 is new for us from 13th of January, but the virus, the class of virus, we know it for almost about 9-10 years, practically about 40 years it's been there that we know of. These are different type of viruses of COVID or coronavirus. So they behave quite similarly and their cell structure is the same. Just to give you a very quick insight into that, I'm sure you've heard from many kind of videos that the coronavirus is an RNA virus. It is not a DNA virus, so it's very restricted as to how it can proliferate, because DNAs can produce RNAs and proliferate, but RNAs can't. So it's an RNA virus which is capsulated with a polypeptide coat, which is like a cholesterol lipid coat, and that has something called spike protein coming out. Those spike proteins are the keys which can go onto the surface of the human cells where the lock is. So it's a key and lock mechanism. So once this virus goes onto the virus spike protein, which is the key, it identifies human cell, ACI, we call it, the typical type of cells, finds the key, it locks in, and then it gets into the cell. So you can see if there is no key, you can't get into your own house. So it's the same way the virus cannot get its RNA into the cell to produce more RNAs to proliferate more and come out and infect other people. So the principle, the knowledge we have from all the other coronaviruses is that the virus cannot survive outside a living cell. So it absolutely cannot proliferate or multiply outside the living cell because it needs to use material in a living cell to make more RNA, that's for sure. But even if the cell comes out in different surfaces, it can live for some time, but not months and months. The most we know is about 4 to 6 weeks it can live in the best of conditions. Now we are talking about burying a body and the body start to decompose and the cells break and it comes out of its coffin or whatever, and then it goes into the soil and then it diffuses through. And remember, soil has got different pH, which is the acidity, and that breaks the protein coat. So for that reason, even if the virus comes out, obviously it will definitely break down and relieve its RNA. Even if that RNA get washed down into the water table and consumed by human, the RNA cannot infect anybody. It needs to have its spike protein. So that's the science behind it. So despite the fact there is unshakable evidence to prove this, the government insists on the advice it received by the advisory committee. Later on, if you have some time, I'll go into the politics of that. So they say, no, according to the evidence we have, we cannot approve it. So scientifically, there is absolutely no evidence to prove that everybody which is infected of COVID-19 has to be cremated.
A very specific question. Does the World Health Organization, the WHO, recommend that bodies should be cremated? Yes or no?
Absolutely not. Its first recommendation came in March, and it said, no, there is no, so long as you adhere to the infection control method, which is, wearing the PPEs and how you carefully handle the body. It revised its instruction, its recommendation in August, which did not change it at all. In fact, it was more stronger on recommending both burial and cremation should be allowed. And then the last one was in November, and even in that, they were quite recommended. They recommended that both should be the cultural practices and religious practices should be honored, and cremation and burial has to be allowed. And obviously, as you know, the problem is that WHO cannot put a rule on the country. They can only make recommendations.
Sure. I know most of the world are still burying their COVID victims, so this is an exceptional case, Sri Lanka. Now, how are the Muslims being impacted? Do we have specific cases? Any one of you two would like to take on that? And how they're using this against the Muslim community?
I can tell you, so I think, sorry, Moez, I'll let you answer that. Just a quick point, which I forgot to mention before from the question you put forward to Brother Moez, is that how is it targeted towards Muslim about this COVID-19? How did it came up? Obviously, there was stepwise from the history I told you. There was stepwise processes to intensify the Islamophobia, and that intensified after the Easter bombing in Sri Lanka, which was which was conducted by a group of fanatic Islamic groups. But then obviously that was the reason for personal persecutions, even at the high levels. And then when the corona came, the issue came. You must remember what I mentioned to you about how they were targeting on Muslim interests and Muslim rights. The reason why they do it is they say this is a 78% Buddhist country, and the rule and the following of cultures has to be Buddhist based. So one of the things what they're trying to say is, why is it that everybody else need to be cremated and Muslims should be allowed to bury? They actually turned it around. Even though this affected the Christians and Catholics as well, they were not as vocal, because their archbishop actually kind of came out and gave a statement that's saying, well, we should accept cremation because that's the best for the country, because that was what the government said. But Muslims were quite insistent on it. Of course, it's not only part of your human rights, it's part of the Islamic ritual and the need to do it. So they use this to stamp on saying it is the Buddhist way. So they say cremation is the Buddhist way. Unless there is 100% safety that we know of, we are not going to allow this. So that was the reason why it is more impactful on Muslim than others. Muiz, do you want to take on the question about the cases you want to bring in?
The cases, yeah. On 10 September, a 20 days baby boy was cremated within 12 hours time. The parents did not give the permission, or they did not allow to cremate. It was done by forcibly. And also there are many cases, and also they cremate not only they don't cremate only the infected infected patients. They do cremate the suspected one also. If they found any suspected COVID suspected, and if they make cremations. Likewise, so far 150 body has been cremated forcibly. 150.
How many people have died of COVID in Sri Lanka, to give us a percentage?
Yeah, around 400 and 450 totally. One third, yeah. Yeah, and the Muslims are living, the makeup like 9.7 or around 10% are living in Sri Lanka, Muslims. But the COVID so people have died in COVID, 1/3. This is also a strange statistics.
So there's 10% population, approximately 33% COVID deaths.
COVID death, yes, exactly. And also this is
Do you get a feeling here, Brother Moise, that there's been an exaggeration of diagnosis, or do you think this is a really reflection of what is happening to the Muslim community?
So actually, there are some, there are some. We can say that we can't accept this. We can't accept this this incident because it is not normal, right? So there are some games playing behind this, but yeah. So we can't say that. Yeah.
Can I also shine some light in here? So there are two cases, two scenarios. Number one, either those who got unwell and just before they died, they were kind of diagnosed of COVID, and then obviously they die, and then their family was forced to sign a consent form. To an extent, they will not allow the family to look at the body or see the body without signing this form. So obviously they were emotionally blackmailed to sign it. Once it's signed, they let them see that. In at least half of the cases, they don't even allow them to pray, do the janazah prayer, and then take them to cremate. But the other one, which is more concerning, is the one who goes to hospital, have 2 tests for COVID, and both were negative. And then we find out the person was died. The family get a call that's saying, okay, this person died, COVID-19 positive, PCR positive, or whatever, and they say they're cremate, or they said they have been cremated. So that is the biggest concern for us. even to a point. I don't think it's 33%. It goes up to about 45% from the numbers what I've heard, but we say at least 33%. The proportionate nature, because remember in the UK, so you got, for example, we know for sure the BAME community, the Black, Asian and ethnic minority, have got a high risk. So that's a genetical risk. Also, we have it's our lifestyle and our tendency to have other diseases like, for example, obesity and diabetes increases our risk because we are a different race genetically. In Sri Lanka, everybody's the same race. Everybody's Asian, everybody's same race. To be honest with you, the origins of Sri Lankan Muslims, even though they came from Arab traders, majority of them married to Sinhalese women. So which means our lineage goes to the same race. So you can't have a scientific fact to prove that Muslims are at high risk, and that's why 1/3 or quarter of the population or 40% of the population of those who infected with COVID are Muslim. There is no scientific reason to prove that. But my worry is that those cases where the cases were negative and become automatically positive, in those cases, the family people, the ones who were willing to question these challenges, they have actually went to the medical officer and told them, could we please take a sample and check this in the private labs to prove it is PCR positive? There were no kind of leniency. There were no facilities were given for that. Even to the point that right at the beginning in May, I think 5th of May, there's somebody called Fatima Rinoza who actually had pneumonia, who did not have any positive COVID-19. The family got a call that saying she'll be transferred into an infection disease hospital because she's getting worse. And the next day they get a call and say, sorry, we cremated her because she's very likely to be COVID-19 and we cremated her. That's the only message they get. They didn't get any kind of warning shot. However, the PCR came back later after the cremation was negative. And a medical professional had to come out and announce that in the national TV that it was negative and it was a mistake. And obviously, you must have heard that initially, the first gazette the government actually published about COVID-19, they allowed cremation and burial. But after this case, overnight, after a similar case, overnight, they changed it into no cremation could be allowed. Sorry, no burial could be allowed. So you can see there's a lot of political rivalry. There's a lot of non-scientific based decision making, which nobody can question or challenge, or even from a legal perspective. And that is the frustration we have as Muslims, that there is no way to take matters forward in a formal manner.
Okay, going back to the case, I just want to maybe you might to expand on this, that apart from the human rights violation, which Muslims, diagnosed or not diagnosed as COVID-19 are being cremated, on top of that, I hear that the government is actually putting a bill for the cremation itself. Is that correct?
Yeah, the bill had actually gone through. The bill had gone through.
Not a legal bill. I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah, legal. Yeah, but the fact is, the fact is that we took the case to the Supreme Court, the country's highest judiciary. And we had 11 cases with backed up scientific and reports, medical reports and everything to go down the route of that, saying the notion they put down as either confirmed COVID or suspected COVID. That is the danger, right? So if it is confirmed COVID, somebody can, stand up and argue, okay, well, it is COVID and, we are concerned, it's to do with the nations or whatever. But even those ones say suspected COVID, the PCR is readily available. The lateral test is readily available there. So there is no reason medically or even logistically that a body could be buried without confirming it is COVID. They got mortuary facilities, everything. So the reason why that is bolted into the Gazette is that if something goes wrong, like the Renoza's case, they have an escape clause. The escape clause, it was actually by expert who it could be a junior, medical officer who decides that. But then there's no fairness, there's no justice to the family. So you can see that the system's actually designed in such a way, from the receiver's perspective, you'll always fail because you cannot take matters forward.
Okay, we've discussed quite a bit about the cremation and the COVID crisis that Muslims are facing in Sri Lanka. Are there any other areas where their human rights and their Muslim practices are being violated? Dr. Brother Moise, you can start off, and then maybe we'll have Dr. Feroz again.
Yes, As I said earlier, the Sri Lankan Muslim has been facing the human rights violations since 2009, soon after the end of civil war in Sri Lanka. So the Muslims are what is called they have been facing, like, their businesses. That is number one. Sri Lanka, they are marginalized from their business. They cannot do their business, their activities, and they have there are a lot of involvement in a kind of racism activities are taking place. Also, the what's called hijab. There's an issue raised, hijab issue for the ladies. They cannot. They made a big trouble wearing the hijab sometimes, and also they raised the issue with the halal. 2 years or 3 years back, they raised the issue with halal issues. Likewise, Sri Lankan Muslim now, they have been facing a lot of discriminations by this agenda. Actually, we would say this is an agenda is taking place. It is actually created with the ultra extremist Buddhist national concept. This is what this is the agenda behind this scenario. So the international organizations such as the Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, all the other organizations are close. They are watching closely the violations. They are reporting to the United Nations and the other organizations, but still the government or authorities they don't care, or they don't still seem they are like deaf. They don't react for anything. Yeah.
Aladdin, Basma, that since the 1892, I think the first Sinhala Muslim incident happened, there had been incidences. These are like ad hoc incidences happening, but we normally put it down to these are personal dispute, which starts at smaller level and goes up, which is in a multicultural country. This is I don't know if you had a bit lost of, especially in Asia or developing countries, this is common, and that has happened. But what changed, turned for the worse, was the 2009 LTT coming down, because the entire country's headache is gone purely because the LTT, the Tamil Tigers, were brought to the ground. And then, of course, everybody, as though they woke up to find out, okay, well, we have to think about what the Sinhala nation, the Buddhist nation is, and Muslims are the next target because we need to bring them down. But I have to tell you something important here. You must have heard of Viratu, the Buddhist monk who actually masterminded the change of attitude towards the Rohingya Muslims during the massacre and genocide. He actually made a personal visit to Sri Lanka to meet up with one of the prominent monks who is obviously anti-Islamophobic, called Nyanasara. So he went and he looked around everywhere, and he could see Muslim prevalence and how Muslims were welcomed by the Buddhists. As I mentioned to you, I was born in Sri Lanka before I came to the UK. And then I lived there with the Sinhalese. I had a lot of friends, but I was very young at that time. And then I haven't seen a welcoming nation like that anywhere. Not non-Muslim, but welcoming nations. And we had a very good, peaceful life. We didn't have any trouble in terms of from the official or government or formal manners. And the life was very good for Muslims, purely because of most of the Muslims actually lived within Sinhalese, so they understood us and they worked with us. There had been a slight culture shift when Muslims start to adapt more of an Arabic-like cultures, like they start to change their clothes to abayas and things like that. But it's not the main fact, because the personal issue was not changed. Muslims were still friendly. But the pivotal point was that 2009, and then the focus changed about targeting Muslim. So they found things, even this hijab matter, abaya matter, the halal matter, everything, they were existent before. but they never bothered them before. And to a point,
interrupt, Dr. Firoz. Is a hijab or the niqab banned in Sri Lanka?
There was no ban, but it comes to a point of a contentious issue, and those Buddhist extremists took it into the roads and things, and then even the government buildings started to become more hostile towards those who wore there. First, of course, the niqab, and then, of course, it went into the hijab, and the matter with the Easter bombing didn't help matters either. But we as Muslim, we try to actively promote not wearing niqab at that time for the safety reasons. The imams and the prominent religious leaders, Muslim leaders, they try to tell the staff, we need to cooperate with the securities. So please consider not to wear the niqab. But hijab wasn't a compromise. But then our Muslims were targeted in hospitals, in government building, even the shops. But Muslims did fight back in a more individual and village and town levels. But that wasn't a bigger issue, because then the issue changed into the terrorism issues with regards to the Easter bombing, and then it came into COVID, and of course everything turned onto COVID. So the point I was trying to make is everything which happened against Muslim has become systematic and engineered into the system, where people could not reach out for help. And they couldn't go to there were incidences where Muslim businesses were targeted. There was a kind of arson attacks. And then when they went to the police will not take their, what they call police entries, purely because they will say, you need to bring, proof. And then when they come back and they say, no, you need to bring other proofs. And then they were actually arrested to say, I know personally somebody who used to run an institution, like a college, private college. It's a small scale. And somebody actually did an arson attack on him. When he went to the police to put an entry, they arrested him and said, you are trying to do an insurance fraud. And he didn't even actually have an insurance at that time. So I'm just trying to give an example as how systematically they are restricting your freedom for, your rights or minority rights. But it's becoming more because it becomes part of the government's agenda to please the majority pleasures, purely because of the voting reasons.
Sure. Okay, we've had some very harrowing incident in the last half an hour, both of you. So thank you very much for that. We've noticed that Muslims, after the demise of Tamil Tiger, have been picked up, and different reasons have used to target them, whether it's COVID, and then you also talked about halal, the hijab issue, and other Muslim symbols like businesses and so forth. How do we proceed? I mean, those people who are listening to this and our viewers, how can they help try and bring some balance and try and help the Sri Lankan Muslims or non-Muslims in this case as well, whose human rights are being violated? What can they be doing? Can I have maybe 2 minutes from each of you? Maybe Moise, you start first.
Yes. So all the activities have been taken from the international level, from the Sri Lankan people who are living abroad, and still the authorities tone deaf, right? So we need the international supports. We urge the international community to come up to a fight against the human rights violations in Sri Lanka. This is not only the Muslims issue. This is the human rights, the human rights violations, right? They are refusing. They are denying the religious rights in Sri Lanka. So especially the cremation. The cremation is not only for the Muslims. They forcibly cremating not only Muslims' bodies, the Christians and the other people who wish to perform their final rites for their loved ones. So we are urged our international community to come and support in our missions, and we have been organizing some protests in every corner of the world, and we have been organizing seminars, and we have been working on this in the human rights and the democratic circle. So we need the support from international people who are wish to support for human rights. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Practical on that?
Sure, yes. I think, as I said, we have exhausted the highest judicial hope in Sri Lanka. So, and there is no direct responses from the government itself, even people who work within the government. When they try to reach these matters, we try to put forward kind of pages and pages of scientific evidence to prove to them that there is no basis on not allowing for burial. So at the moment, as it stands, there is no hope within the country. So the only hope is outside the country. So we would like to reach out for the international community, Muslim countries, as well as non-Muslim countries, the human rights, UNHCR, and everybody to try to pressurize the government if at all possible. There are NGOs and there are individuals who can actually have influence within your government. For example, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, even the UK, US, everyone. We try to just reach out to our MPs, try to make some diplomatic pressures towards the government to impose what's widely accepted as safe. That's all what we're asking for. So if the WHO can come out and give an open statement, 3 times revised, not change the statement, that there is scientific fact to say that you are not, Sri Lanka is not a unique country. We compare Sri Lanka to Malaysia, for example, where the rainfall rate is quite similar. Some of the Latin American countries, all that country, they are burying their dead with COVID-19. And so what we would like to reach out for every one of you is please do whatever you can, even if you can't do anything, please make dua so that our Muslim brothers and sisters who actually pass out of this COVID-19, as well as the Christians and Catholics who believe in burial, that we get a speedy resolution. But that can't just happen overnight. It just doesn't happen like that, a magic. We need to make changes. And if you could please push and pressurize the diplomats, the MPs, so that they can actually push the government to listen to the international outcries on the basis of scientific facts, so that they would allow the burial. Because it is our religious obligations to make sure we perform the last rituals. So that's, as you all know, wash the body, coffin the body, which is shroud the body, pray for the body, and bury the body. So because our life starts from the grave, this is a temporary life to prepare. So that, even with that thought, and also I don't have enough time to go into the psychological aspect of how much of the family who lose this loved one will suffer when they have no point of reference to go for bereavement. That's what the biggest thing we have. We lost our father or son or whoever. We go to their grave, and it's just staying there for 5 minutes is a massive calmness to the heart. And that opportunity is taken away from our brothers and sisters in Sri Lanka. For that reason, I would really like the audiences to do whatever you can to be able to highlight this matter. First is to bring awareness internationally. Second, to use any channels we can to press the government towards giving us a favorable resolution. Jazakallah khair. Thank you.
Jazakallah, Dr. Firoz, and Jazakallah, Brother Moise. And to our listeners, we've heard some very harrowing things of what is happening in Sri Lanka. I think it's beholds on all of us to do whatever we can. And there are many practical steps that we can take, even using the social media from the West, especially those who are living in the West, to make sure that we highlight this so the Sri Lankan government is felt under pressure. And in particularly use your MPs to raise the questions in Parliament and to make sure that the British government puts whatever diplomatic and cultural constraints it can upon Sri Lanka so that it brings about a change. Remember, if we allow these kind of things to happen, we might think that this is far away, but this is not. In the global world, this can happen to Muslims in the West as well. So it is something that is very important for all of us to make sure that this is stopped and Muslims can come to believe and practice whatever they do in every aspect, as living people and as dead as well, so that the human rights are not abused. I thank you both very much. Thank all my listeners for joining us. And inshallah, we'll see you again next week. Jazakallah khair, Brother Firoz, Dr. Firoz, and Brother Moise. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.